Okay, so now it's broadcasting, so we'll start letting people in, and
Okay,
I'm going to mute myself for just a few minutes.
sure.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, Prasanna.
All right, I think we are ready. So there are people are slowly redirecting here. So
Yep.
I think we get started. Hello and welcome everyone for this session, getting started with Project Online and Power Apps. Apologize for a slight miscommunication on the link to this webinar. So we are working to redirect everybody to this session. I will hand it over to Paul. Paul is a very good friend. He's a project MVP, and he's one of the foremost bloggers, especially with Power Apps. And I'm sure he'll talk about the series he has been doing on his blog about creating Power Apps. So I'm very, very curious and interested to listen to what he says. Hope you all will derive the same value. Take it away, Paul.
Brilliant. Thank you, Prasanna. Hi, guys. Welcome to my session on getting started with Project Online and Power Apps. I hope you've had a good session so far with the keynote. So firstly, I'd just like to take the moment to thank our sponsors for the event. Without their support, the event would not be possible. So a little bit about myself. So my name is Paul Mather. I'm a project MVP and have been for the last 5 years. I'm currently working for a company called Corporate Project Solutions based in the United Kingdom. My current job title is Head of PPM Solution Architecture, but I have a mixed role. I also head up the product development team for a product called Edison 365, which is an Office 365 product for innovation and project and portfolio management. My contact details are on the slide there if anyone has any questions or queries after the session. Also my Twitter username, and also my blog, pwmather.wordpress.com. So as Prasanna said, I regularly blog on that site, all content relating to Project Online, Project Server, and associated services around Office 365. I also quite regularly participate on the TechNet and MSTM forums, answering questions and hopefully answering people's questions and adding value there. And also regularly post solution starters for various JavaScript samples, PowerShell samples, Power BI report packs on the Microsoft Gallery, all which are free to download. And I say they are solution starters, but certainly should help to get things started. So Project Online apps introduction. So the focus on this event is Power Apps and how we can get those to work with Project Online data. So first off, what is Project Online? A quick summary. So for those that don't know, it's the cloud equivalent of what was Project Server, but hosted in Office 365 with no hardware required. You just pay for the software and you get full access to the Microsoft's cloud PPM solution. So what options do we have for building apps? So Project Online does have APIs to interact with the data programmatically, and that's from reading the data, updating data, creating data, deleting data. So with that in mind, I've listed 3 options here for building apps, and that could be full desktop apps, mobile apps, web-based apps. So first one, bespoke custom apps, typically built using Visual Studio Code. But to do that, obviously you would need to have an understanding of a development language, typically C#, .NET. An alternative is Xamarin, which is a great application for building cross-platform mobile applications for iOS, Windows, Android. And then lastly, Power Apps. So Power Apps are a service within Office 365. So the idea of Power Apps is to provide the sort of power user, so you don't need to know any code. If you're familiar with things like Excel, formulas and functions, that sort of syntax, you'll be able to build business applications with Power Apps. So what are Power Apps? As mentioned previously, Power Apps are an Office 365 service that enable you to build business applications that can consume or work with other Office 365 services, but also not necessarily Office 365 services. Power Apps come with various connectors to things like Jira, Yammer, Trello, Dynamics 365, just to name a few. I will go in to show you where the connections are created, and you'll see that the list is quite a few different services on that list. The connections are shared with the Microsoft Flow service, so Power Apps and Flow do go hand in hand. So how are Power Apps created? So currently there's a Windows 10 application that you can download to create and author Power Apps with the Power Apps Studio, but also you can develop and author apps using the web-based Power Apps Studio. To access Power Apps, you can either access it through the web interface, and Power Apps is accessible via the Office 365 Waffle or app launcher, or there's also mobile apps for Power Apps. So then you can access your applications that you build through the Power app. So why use Power Apps? So Power Apps are great, as mentioned, for those power users that want to be able to develop business applications without having to touch any code. You don't have to compile any code or worry about any of that. You just have the studio to develop the apps, and you essentially have a blank canvas and drag and drop all sorts of controls on there and then interact with the data. So will Power Apps provide all of the capability required? Bit of an open question, obviously depends on the requirements of the business app that you need to develop. As you'll see as we go through, there is a Project Online connector to directly work with Project Online, but the connector itself of Project Online data is in preview, and it's quite limited in comparison to what the underlying Project Online APIs offer. But for services like Dynamics 365 and SharePoint, there's a lot of capability built into Power Apps. If you've noticed SharePoint, you see SharePoint Online, you'll see that Power Apps is pretty well baked into the application. You can see it on lists and easily create new forms for lists, etc. So how do Power Apps work with Project Online? So as mentioned, that there is a Project Online connector that you can use within Power Apps and Flow. Also, you can make use of a SharePoint connector. I've got a SharePoint on there because one of the apps that I show you will actually be consuming Project Online data, but it will be via the SharePoint connector. But there's a process to get that data into SharePoint first. Or alternatively, it could be a combination of both of those as well within one app. But also you can call Azure Functions. So Azure Functions are the serverless service from Microsoft within Azure to enable you to write code that runs in an Azure function and you can call those from Power Apps. So you could call an Azure function to directly work with the underlying Project Online APIs to get more capability within your Power App. So what I'm going to do now is just drop into a quick demonstration of one of the example apps. The first one is actually built with the SharePoint connector. So if you bear with me. It's just, so here I'm in the Power App interface, and it's just a web-based interface here, and I've accessed it from the Office 365 waffle, or I can go directly to web.powerapps.com. So here I've got my example apps. I'm just going to play this one through. So the idea of this one is a navigation app within Power Apps for Project Online to easily enable you to navigate around Project Online and access different areas of Project Online from a mobile device where you have the Power App installed. So here you can see I've got a list of projects that I've got on this environment, showing various bits of metadata about the project, the name, owner, percent complete, etc. I can then drill in to see the details, or drill back. And if we look at this one, I've also got images related to the projects. So we can see the more details here, acquisition target analysis, project ID, owner, description, etc. So I've got various properties on there, including the project site URL. I've also got buttons to enable me to navigate to various different places within PWA. So in this example, I can easily navigate to the project site. That will open up and navigate to the project site. While that's loading, I can also navigate to the project details very easily, and that will load. And all of that is done through the Power App itself. We have some launch functions, and then we just launch the URL and pass in the right parameters. In this case, it's the site URL, which we've already got on the page here. And for tasks, all we need to do is pass in the project GUID into the right PDP that we want to access. But using that concept, we could just as easily have a link here to access directly to the issues list or the risks list, or go straight into create a new issue or a new risk. So we can improve that navigation around Project Online using this example Power App. We've also got the ability to search, so we can easily find projects. If I start typing names of a project, you can see it filters down the list, and I can easily access that project. So here's another one, access this one. Again, we've got a different image associated with this project. And if I click sites, it will go off to that particular audit tracking site. Also on here, I've got just an example chart that I've built within this Power App, just consuming some data from the underlying SharePoint list for this project information. So we've got 23 projects in progress, 10 not started, 1 completed. I've also got a button here to go out and create a new project. Because we're using just a SharePoint connector here, that doesn't provide the ability to go and create you a new project. So in this case, I just link out straight to the create project page, and that will enable you to choose your enterprise project type. So that's the example SharePoint app. Say there is a process to get the data into there, which we will cover. So I'm just going to drop back into the slide. So as mentioned, that is a sort of a navigational app just to improve the accessibility of certain features within Project Online. So it could be the project site, issues, risks, different PDPs, all from one interface, and provide that summary level information. So it does make use of purely just a SharePoint connector. So there is actually a process to get that data into a SharePoint list first. So what we'll have a quick look at now is just creating or the process to firstly to get that data into the SharePoint list, and then how we go about creating a Power App that's linked to a SharePoint list. So what I've got first is I'll just show you the list that I'm using as the source for that Power App. So this is a list I've created in my PWA site, and I've got various columns that map to the data that I'm pulling back from Project Online into this list, and a project image column to store that image, and that's the image that we surface in the Power App. So to get that data there, what we've got is an example PowerShell script. This is a script that I've published, and it is available to download from the Microsoft Gallery. After this session, I will be providing a summary blog post with all the relevant links to downloads and things if you're interested to follow some of these things through. So just a quick overview of the PowerShell script. So here's some environment settings to connect to the source PWA site, usernames, passwords, the list name, which is project data. Here's the project online OData URL, and pulling through the various properties that we want to see in our Power App, project name, % complete, etc. And then within this web request, we go through that project online OData URL and then pass all of that data into our results data set. And then the script will go down, connect to SharePoint, connect to the target SharePoint list that you specified. And then for each row or each project record that it's got within our results data set, it will first query to see if that project already exists using the project ID. If it does exist, it will go and update that item. And then we can see that it's mapping from the results data set. These are the properties that we've got from the OData API. And then here we map them to various columns in the SharePoint list. If it's a new project and it hasn't previously been synchronized to the list, then we create the new item, and exactly the same concept. But that way we can keep that SharePoint list in sync with Project Online. And this process could run either from an Azure function or a Windows scheduled task, nightly, weekly, however often you needed to update that data. So then we've got, so before I move on, I'll just show you the example, different connectors that we've got available to Power Apps out of the box. So here, this is the list of Power Apps. A lot are Microsoft services, but you will also find services that aren't Microsoft, so you can consume those within your Power Apps and Flow. So to create an example app, I'm in the landing page for Power Apps, and in this case, I'm going to use the SharePoint connector. So I'm going to start from data here. Wait for this to load. And then there's several different options for starting with data, SharePoint being one of them. So we can see here, SharePoint, Dynamics 365, Salesforce. There's a few there, but in this example, we'll start with the SharePoint phone layout. So then in here, we just put in the URL if it's not appeared already, but it is there, so we can click that. Then what that will do is go off and find all of the SharePoint lists on that associated site. In this case, we want project data because that contains all of our project online data, and click connect. And what that will do is go off and actually build your example app for you. It probably won't be right, but it will make best guesses on what data, based on the list data, what it should present back in. So within 30 seconds, we've already got an example app that we can start to change and base on our requirements. So it offers the drill down capability already. It's created us several different screens. So we can drill into this one and we can see the different details here. We can drill back, but typically things that you would need to do would be delete or change that plus icon, because that will just add a new SharePoint list item. It won't actually create a new project, for example. On here, this will just delete the list item. It won't actually delete the project. This will edit the list item and won't edit the actual underlying project. So to avoid any confusion with users, you would typically change those buttons or delete them or point them elsewhere. So that's just getting started with creating a really basic SharePoint app. Obviously, with the time we've got available for the session, I won't be able to walk through the whole process, but it is fully documented on one of my blog posts. But what we will do is just drop into the example app I created earlier, this one here, and we'll just edit it. and just have a look at some of those properties and how that one is put together. Sorry, bear with me while it just loads. So here I'm using the web-based studio to modify these. So you can use a desktop client or app if you wanted to, but I find that the web-based client is easier. Or it's the same capability, but if you can do something via the web, why download an application to do it? So here we've got similar screens to what we saw on the initial app that we just created a moment ago, but I've changed. I've got different properties here. So if we click on this button, we can drill through to see the details. If we go back, we can, or click on the project site, we can click advanced, and we can see that this is launching data card value 8, for example. So it's using the Power App launch function. And if we have a look through our list on our data card, if we look at data card value 8, we can expand here and actually see what data card value 8 is. And in this case, it's the project URL. And if we click on tasks, so everything's context sensitive. So wherever you click within the designer, you have different properties available and different settings available. So tasks is a bit more involved to do the linking. So we're still doing that launch function, but we're specifying the correct PDP that we want to go to. In this case, it's the schedule PDP. And then we're passing in data card value 2 into the project UID query string parameter. And data card value 2 will just be this project ID property that we can see here. So data card value 2. So using that concept, as I said earlier, we could easily create other navigational points within the app, buttons into issues, risks, benefits, lessons learned, any of those other items that you have on those SharePoint sites, or other project detail pages, or other areas of PWA. So that is the example SharePoint app. One other thing, just to have a quick look at the chart, just to show you that how that is all calculated. So here it's all using that data from the SharePoint list, and we're just doing some calculations based on the progress and in the project data. And then Power Apps does everything for you. All we've done is set some column colors. So that's the getting started with the SharePoint connection. So we can mix and match connections. So we could have this app that had the SharePoint connector and the project connector, but this example is just purely a SharePoint connector. So let's close that. We'll just drop back into the slide deck. So now what we're dropping to is that the main focus of the session is really the Project Online connector, as it's a Project Online conference. It's a better fit than the SharePoint connector. So I'll just demo that one. So back in our Power App Studio, we've got this one here, just as a quick demo. So we'll let that load. And this one is built purely using the Project Online connector for Power Apps. So there's no requirement to push any data into SharePoint. All of the data that we see here is straight from Project Online. So we've got a list of projects. We can drill into those projects, and in this case, I'm listing the tasks. So that's going to load all of the tasks for the acquisition target analysis project. So we're passing in the project ID from the first screen to go and get a filtered set of the tasks for acquisition target analysis. The properties that are available in the Project Online connector are fairly limited, hence why in the navigational type app, the one that was linked to SharePoint, I built a process to pull the data into a SharePoint list and took some of those properties from the Project Online OData reporting API, because that gave me more flexibility to be able to link into different areas. For example, in the Project Online connector for Power Apps, you can't get the project site URL, so you can't do any navigation into anything on the project site. This example here, create project, will actually go and create a new project. So if I just put _test PM demo, just testing. Actually, one other thing before I do that, if I click, I've got some validation on here. So if I click create, the only required property that you have to pass into this create project API in Power Apps is the name. So we've got some validation on this example form. So I have to put in a name. The others can be blank. Test PM demo. We can choose the date. I'll leave it to today's date with this example date picker. And then I can click create. And what that will do is actually go off into the Project Online service and actually go and create that example project. So if we connect to Project Online quick enough, we might see it go through the queue. If not, we'll have a look in the Project Center just to prove it's not smoke and mirrors. So manage queue. And then there we go. We can see that that project is being created through the Project Online queue, and it's currently doing the reporting sync and creating the project site. If we go to the Project Center, then we'll see that project there that's fully editable, just like any normal project. So you can see here, we've got my example project, including my description, and the start date will be correct as well. So with the Project Online connector, we can obviously integrate to the Project Online environment and create data, delete data, whereas we can't do that with the SharePoint connector. So that was just a real simple example that does consume the Project Online, or makes use of the Project Online connector for Power Apps. So just dropping back into the slide deck. So just to summarize, that example app was purely using the Project Online connector for Power Apps, and that enabled us to actually interact live with the Project Online data and also create data, delete data, update data within Project Online without having to call anything else. Project Online connector has the following actions available and triggers. So the actions are, we can publish a project, so we can create a new project and publish it. We can check out an existing project. We can create a new resource, create a new project, create a task in an existing project, list the projects or list the tasks. All of those actions have various parameters that you have to pass into those actions. All of them would require the Project Online PWA URL. But for example, if we were to list projects, that would only require the PWA URL. But if we wanted to list tasks, we'd have to pass in the PWA URL as well as the project ID for the project where we want to see the tasks. Create project, what we just saw in that last app, that requires the PWA URL as well as the project name. They're required parameters, but you have optional parameters around the description and project start date. The Project Online connector also has triggers, which are used in Microsoft Flow. So you can have things, trigger certain other actions on when a project is created, or when a new resource is created, or when a new task is created, or on Project Publish. So there's some examples of starting to build that workflow capability within Flow, but for Project Online. So full details can be seen in the Project Online connector, which I've got a link there. And if we drop out of the session and take a quick look at that docs site, we can see that Project Online, as mentioned, the connector is in preview, but it details all of the different actions as well as the required parameters that I've mentioned previously. And then if we have a look at the project dataset, we can see these are the various properties that are available in the Project Online connector. So we can use those properties to display within our Power App if we're using Project Online. As I mentioned, one example there, the project site URL isn't there, but various other properties are. So back into the slide deck. What we'll do now is we'll just have a look at how the Project Online Connector works with some example queries and data sets within the Power App. So I'm just going to drop into an example app that we created. So just drop back out of there, close that one. So what I've done, I've put together just a basic Power App just to show some of these functions. So some of it is hard coded, just purely for time. So we'll just let this load. So I've got various different screens that are created within this Power App here. Let this load. So the first one that we show is list projects. So we've got a screen here that lists projects from the same environment that we were using previously. And we've got a gallery displayed here to display all of the projects. So if we have a look at the advanced settings, we can see here the function or that we're calling to be able to list the project. So we're calling projectonline.list projects, passing in the correct PWA URL .value, and then here we're specifying the name property. So here we've got this item. If I delete name, we can then see a list of all of those properties that we saw on that Microsoft Docs site for the documentation for the Project Online connector. So we can choose project type, for example. Not a great example there, but if we move on to the create project, here we've got a similar form to what I created in my first demo for the Project Online connector. So again, if we have a look at the button in this case, because the rest of the input boxes are just standard Power Apps capability, and that's where we enter all of the data. It's on the create button where we're actually interacting with that Project Online connector. So we can see here, we're on select, we've got projectonline.create project. So it's that create project action, passing in the PWA URL, and then input text 1 is the project name. Input text 2 in these optional parameters, description, and then also we're using the date picker to specify the start date. And on create, that will pass that data into that create project action and go and create that project in Project Online. We have a look at this list tasks example. So here, this is hard coded. So I've actually hard coded a project ID automatically in here, just for simplicity. So if we have a look at this data table in this example, just another different visual or element that we can add on to this canvas. Again, if we look at the advanced, we see projectonline.list tasks. Then we're passing in that project ID for the project where we want to see those tasks, and then also the PWA URL as well. And on here, in this case, we're just showing name and % complete. There's various other properties that you can include, start date, end date. There's about 10 or so that you can see that is documented on the documentation. Then also, just as another example, we've got Power BI. So in here, we've got the ability to actually insert Power BI dashboards or visuals from your Power BI dashboards into your Power App. So automatically there, we're also pulling through other data from Project Online within our Power App. And everything's inserted from here. So we've got various controls, Power App, Power BI tile being one of them. If I click that, that will actually drill into my example Power BI report that we've got here, and then we've got the full capability. So we're able to surface lots of information within our Power App just by adding different elements onto the canvas without writing any code at all. So that's a walkthrough of using some of those actions and also just thrown in there the Power BI tile as well, because I think that's very useful. And what we'll do now is actually just walk through creating a new blank Power App, consuming the Project Online connector and just listing projects, just to show that end-to-end process for getting started there. So the Project Online connector, you can't start from data, you have to start from a blank app. So from the the landing page. We're going to start from a blank app. We can choose either tablet or mobile. We're choosing tablet in this case. If we click Make This App. And I've already previously created my connector to Project Online, so I won't have to do that process. But the connections are really straightforward to create. I can show you those. So when that's loading, we've got the blank canvas. So all we do here is click Connect to Data, and then this will load all of the connections that I've already previously got or that I've used before in Power Apps. So if I select the Project Online one, in this case, that's now made Project Online available to this particular Power App. And now what I need to do is display or add an element on the canvas to be able to display that data. So in this example, I'm just going to add gallery, vertical, and when that loads, we're going to just change it to, in this case, just title. And we click Advanced in our Properties pane. And then by default, it's got this custom gallery sample. But all we do is we can change that. And in this case, I've just pasted in, but you would type Project Online dot, then the name of the action or function that you want to call, pass in the various parameters, and then dot value. And then it's chosen the first property that's available in that project's data set that it returns. But you can see here on the data that we're choosing for this gallery, got checked out description by default, but I'm going to change that. If I click in that drop down, I then see a list of all of the different properties that are returned from that project data set within the Project Online connector. So I'd look through here, and in this case, I'm going to choose name. So you can see there's that project that I created earlier from that form or from the Power App. That's automatically available in here because we're querying the Project Online data set directly. So now what we'll do is just have a quick look at the other app that we produced earlier. Let's just leave that. So this one here, we'll just play this one. So we've just looked at the connectors in the Design Studio, and then this way we can just do the drill through, but there's no navigation within here, so you'd have to add all of that in. So all we've got is the actual first page. To see the other pages, you'd have to actually link through within the Visual Design Studio. So that's it for the creating or getting started with creating those Power Apps with the Project Online connector. Let's just drop back into the slide deck. So just to recap what we've gone through. So we mainly focused on the Project Online example connector, but we also looked at what the SharePoint connector could do with that Project Online data. But obviously using the SharePoint connector does give us greater flexibility because we can pull in other properties, but you would need that background process to pull in your required Project Online data into a SharePoint list. Whereas the Project Online connector allows us to connect directly into Project Online, but the properties that are available are limited, but it does enable us to actually create data, delete data. But as mentioned, you could have one app that does a combination of both. So you could have a SharePoint connector in there and a Project Online connector in there and have different pages or different controls on that Power App that are using the different connectors. So if it's the navigational part, you could just have the data from a SharePoint list. But then if you wanted to create a new project, you could also have that control linking into the Project Online connector. As mentioned, I will produce a summary blog post that includes links to all of the various different example apps that I've gone through and various PowerShell scripts, etc. If you wanted to follow those through, so the two example apps that I've gone through, I have got detailed blog posts that actually go through step by step creating both of those end to end, including running the PowerShell script. And also the PowerShell script is available to download as a solution starter from the Microsoft Gallery. So that's it as a quick intro for Project Online and Power Apps. So we have got a few minutes if there are any questions, so we'll try and answer your questions. So I'm not a Power Apps expert, but I can certainly point you in the right direction to working with Project Online and Power Apps. But anything I can't answer, I will take away with me and get back to you.
So, Paul, thank you for the awesome session. There was only one question pretty much. Stefan is asking, did I remember right that transfer to DE or Germany needs some additional adjustments? I'm not exactly sure if that question pertains to your session or in general.
Sorry, what was the question again, Prasanna?
It says, did I remember right that transfer to Germany needs some additional adjustments?
Transfer to Germany.
Is it possible to talk about data transfer?
I'm not sure on the context of the question. So we can certainly take that one offline if needed. Feel free to drop me an email and I can certainly try and find out the answer once I know the details.
Sure. If this question is is Power Apps part of a government tenant? That's another question just came up. Gene Liverman is asking.
Part of a government tenant.
Yeah.
It should be. I'm not aware that it's not available as a government tenant, but I don't have access to a government tenant specifically, so I'm not sure on there. It does depend if you've got access to it, if your administrators enabled it, etc. But it should just be there on the app launcher or the waffle, or try to navigate to web.powerapps.com.
Awesome. So Stefan says he will clarify it online. He has your email ID, I guess. So.
Yep, brilliant.
Awesome. So thanks again, Paul, for the awesome session. And my apologies to all the attendees. There was some confusion on the meeting link. And we believe we fixed that issue. So go ahead and join the next session. And thank you, Paul, for being patient.
Brilliant, no problem. Thank you guys for attending. So I hope you found it useful. So enjoy the rest of the conference, and no doubt we'll catch up soon online somewhere.
Awesome, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you.